Detours. Brought to you by Sports and Spokes, the magazine for wheelchair sports and recreation. The U.S. men's wheelchair basketball team played its way to the top of the podium in Tokyo 2021. And they've got a really well-rounded squad. They take the floor against Spain in the opening prelim rounds. Joining us today to give us some valuable insights, once again, Darlene Hunter, gold in Rio, bronze in Tokyo, and Dave Kiley. Well, just too many accolades to mention, but we're just going to go ahead and say Paralympic Hall of Famer and basketball player extraordinaire. So let's go ahead and start breaking down the men's team, because wow, I mean the men's just in general, the whole game is going to be pretty amazing. So Tokyo, let's take a look at that podium. Gold, the U.S. won 64-60 over Japan. Japan takes second, and the bronze goes to Spain, 68-58 over GB. Now, the big question, Dave, and Darlene, you were there. Why and what happened to Japan? I don't see them, even coming into the tournament this year. Why did they not make the Paralympics?
I can't really answer that question, to be honest. As formidable as they were in the last Paralympic Games, I don't know, Dar. Was it a matter of qualification? And
yeah, I don't know exactly what happened to Japan's side, but what happened with Paralympics in general for Paris is that we lost two teams on the women's team and the men's team based on qualifications, and the qualification standards changed. And so when that happened, it was zonal. So when you are qualified based on zone, other teams got in. Once they took the zones away, which is what they did for Paris, and they did whatever top four at world championships, and then you had to go to a repertoire, and whoever battled in the world was the next spots that filled in. So I think a lot of what has happened and what we're seeing is that even like the host country on the women's side, France didn't get in this year, and they had gotten in previously. It's because of how we did qualifications this year for this Paralympics, that some teams that we have used to seeing, we are not seeing, and teams that we're not used to seeing, we are. And that's because we had to go to this repertoire. And I think Japan lost some of their key players that retired after 2020. But that game in 2020, I was on the sideline. It was a remarkable game. It was so fun to be there watching. We were like the only fans in the auditorium, so it was even more fun to sit on the sidelines and see all the battles between USA and Japan.
Yeah, it was definitely a close game, 64-60. So it really went down to the buzzer in many ways. And I guess we're going to only have to imagine that it had to do with classification, because, yeah, it was just so curious to me. How does a team that came that close to winning the gold medal not make the tourney at all? So the teams that got in, GB, once again, Great Britain, Spain, Netherlands, France, Germany, USA, Canada, and Australia. Dave, talking about those teams, there's a lot of great countries there, a lot of great players. How do you see this shaking out?
I see it as a dogfight again. When you shrink from 12 and again, no throwaway games, down to 8, you've got 8 really strong teams. But I think the U.S. is poised. They have double gold medal experience. Their Fab Five, or their starting group, is that of that nature, double gold medalists in Brian Bell, Steve Serio, Trayvon Jennifer, Jake Williams, and John Boy. And then they have such a solid bench where they get Jeremy Meyer coming off, instant offense, lethal scorer. They got Fabian Romo, who's solid, tweener type body and can run the floor and shoot. So I think the U.S. will be tested, like never before, because Matt Scott is not on the floor anymore from the last Paralympic Games. I think they've adjusted really well with the personnel that they have. Spain, If I want me to just keep rolling, I think Spain is probably the greatest threat. They always play with passion. It's in their DNA, and they've got a couple lineups, but their formidable one is their bigs. They can put four bigs on the floor with a class one, and so I think their chances to medal are really good.
Dave, just to jump in and sort of, elaborate on that a little bit. USA drew Spain as their first play, so
Correct.
that's their first round play in prelims, and they played to a fourth place in Tokyo. So, and they only lost to GB they lost by 10, but nonetheless, this was your fourth place team. They were just off the podium.
Well, right, right. So what you did then is something you can look back at, but what you've been doing since is another. Great Britain and Australia, I think, are also formidable challengers. But I think Spain is. Most teams have moved to a U.S. type size lineup.
Which which
Spain
is
has.
which is what, Dave? When you refer to a U.S. size lineup?
Well, when you look at Brian Bell being the tallest player on the U.S. side, Great Britain has potentially the biggest player in the tournament, and Spain is throwing four bigs out there, and so the U.S., whose strategy has been modeled by other countries with tweener type players with all kinds of chair speed and such. The the Spaniards have come out with a big lineup that can shoot, and so that's kind of what I mean, and so we have Nate Hines who's a veteran, and he's big, but he's still not as big as some of these other dominant bigs in the tournament. So it will definitely be a dogfight, for the podium.
Darlene, feel free to jump in. I know you've seen these teams play. Even though you claim that you may not be an expert on the men, I'm sure you've watched, and I know you know a little.
GB is going to be a powerful force. They always are. GB USA battles sometimes get pretty intense because of just that pride over the years. And that's the thing, we're not really, we have these battles with teams that are just, we get into different battles that aren't about the game sometimes and just about like the pride of winning. But GB's always been there. Australia's coming out with a pretty good team this year too. So it's really, with it being such a smaller like I know two teams being gone doesn't seem like a smaller tournament, but when you don't have those like warm-up games or those practice games or those games in which you can like work on things happen quicker, and it's harder to get out of slumps or people being sick or tired. I know that was a big thing when we were in Tokyo, is like everybody stay away from COVID. And so as long like you don't have as much time to recover when you don't have those extra two teams. But the men, USA men, they've been together. You have Steve Ciro at his fifth time there. So he's going to have that experience, and he's been working hard to really lead that team to do a historical thing. We've never won 3 Paralympic golds in a row. So they're super hungry for it. So, and they're the team to beat. Sometimes it's hard to be the team that's always been on top and keeping it up top. But USA men, with Jake Williams being that outside shooter, Steve's going to be that hustle player. You got Brian Bell, who's going to battle inside the key for everything. We're a really physical team on the men's side. So it's hard to stop the USA as well. And they're poised to be there at the top as well. Like USA, we don't want to ever lose. So we pretty much throw our bodies around. But without Matt, that's a huge hit. They've replaced it with some great people that will take over, but Matt's personality and just his energy is going to give a very different vibe this year at the Paralympics for the players on the court.
We got to mention Paul Schulte as well, because he's got plenty of gas in his tank, and he's coming off the bench with veteran experience at the highest level. So it'll be interesting to see how Robbie uses Paul in the coming into the game. Uh, but he could be a great X factor as well. Great Britain 2 weeks ago lost to Germany, and only Great Britain only played 5 players the entire game. When you would think you're playing with lineups to get ready, there's some concern.
So you think
in
they would have done a lot more substitution to see who was doing what?
Absolutely. Even in the Paralympic tournament, you can't get away with playing 5 players. You have to have some bench, uh, involvement, and so I think Australia and GB are definite um, uh, podium potential. Uh, I watched.
And interestingly, the U.S. drew Australia as their third in the prelims. So
Yeah,
there's no cakewalk here.
no, no. We just, we recently, not so recently, but not that long ago, we had 4 friendly games. I commentated on a live stream and watched Australia, from center court, and Brad Ness, the coach, had all his players at the 3 point line. I thought I was watching the NBA, and his all those players had the green light to go from three, and I'm sitting there, uh, you know, I publicly said over live stream, "There's no way they can keep this up." Well, I had to eat my words by the end of the game because they continued to keep up a 3 point onslaught, that high percentage, and they beat the U.S. in the first game. Um, but there's concern. Germany took care of Great Britain. Germany and the Netherlands are probably the 2 most improved teams in Europe, and Germany has an elite offensive set. So they're my 2 sleepers, Netherlands and Germany. If all goes the way it's supposed to, which it hardly ever does, then GB and Australia with Tristan Knowles, a 41-year-old who's the motor of the Aussies. And Aussies always bring fire. That's also in their DNA. Uh, so we're gonna just have a knockdown, drag out tournament, and it's who's on that day, who stays out of foul trouble. When I mentioned the 4 bigs from Spain, it's all well and good if you can. They have a history of being in foul trouble, so to keep those 4 on, they got to stay out of foul trouble.
We'd like to take a minute to thank our sponsor, Sports and Spokes Magazine. For nearly 50 years, they've produced stories on iconic athletes performing at the top of their game, given generational coverage of sports dating back to the 1970s, and they've shown the way with exciting and timeless magazine cover shots. To stay on top of all the latest news from the world of high performance adaptive sports, go to sportsandspokes.com. Sports and Spokes, the magazine for wheelchair sports and recreation. Well, it sounds like you're setting this up to be a pretty physical tournament. So let's go ahead and set that podium. Let's go bronze, silver, gold.
DK, you go first.
Yeah, yeah. Well, uh, I'm
Well,
going.
US should win gold, we would say.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be their toughest time to get to gold, but they will get to it. I think. I think Spain will. Again, depending on the lineup of crossover and all that, I think they would be my choice for a silver. Uh, and I'm looking that Germany's going to upset its way into the medal round.
Wow, there you go. Well, we
DK's
heard it
throwing
from
in
two.
some big upsets there.
Yeah, yeah. Um, you know, I don't think my source in Great Britain says that team has looked lost at times, and so they could get it together. But if they had to play 5 players in a 2 weeks ago against Germany, I don't get that. I don't get that.
I love that you have a source in GB. That's my favorite
Yeah, me
line
as
of
well.
this whole thing. My source told me. I love that you have a source.
Well, our
I know who
podcast
your
host
source is, but
told me
I
to
just am
come
laughing.
prepared. Told me to come prepared, and that's one thing I know about basketball is preparation. So I got into the know with the teams that I think are and heard are going to contend.
All right, well, there it is. We heard it from the best, 2 of the best. I really want to thank you. You guys did come prepared, and that certainly makes everything so much more enjoyable and makes my job a lot easier too. So, just thank you guys so much. Valuable insights. Really looking forward to seeing how this whole thing shakes out. And when it's all done, let's get together again and talk about the outcome.